daily vlog of Unsung Heroes of the Bible. My mug I'm using today says Cancun on it. Now, you might think that's because I vacation in Cancun. It's not really. For a few years there, when I was teaching at New Orleans Seminary, we had a partnership with the seminary in Havana, Cuba. And in those days, you couldn't fly directly from the United States to Havana. So we had to go through Cancun. And several times, Dr. Alan Jackson and myself, we would fly to Cancun, spend the night, and then take a different airline over to Havana. So today, praying for our brethren in Cuba and our missionaries that serve there. As we think about unsung heroes, we think about Aaron's sons today. Now, you probably remember, and we've talked about in these vlogs from Exodus, that his two sons, Nadab and Abihu, were struck down by the Lord for offering what was called unauthorized fire. We find that in Leviticus chapter 10. They weren't obedient to the Lord, and they ended up dying because of the Lord's judgment upon them. But Aaron had four sons that were called into the priestly ministry. So the two other ones, Eleazar and Ithamar, these two were not struck down. They didn't do the wrong thing. These two sons, though often go unnoticed, should not be unnoticed. They are unsung heroes of the Bible. They faithfully continued to serve and endured, even at great loss of their two brothers, and carried the priesthood forward as sons of Aaron. This was a moment of crisis in the Levitical priesthood. Eleazar and Ithamar were among the four sons, as we said. They were all set apart for the priesthood, but their ministry took a tragic turn when these two older brothers, Nadab and Abihu, died before the Lord because of disobedience to his commands. Now you can imagine the shock and the grief at losing their two brothers very suddenly, and seeing God's holiness in that way could have been terrifying to them. Yet, even in the midst of probably what was great sorrow, they decided to remain faithful and obedient to the Lord. There's a lesson from these unsung heroes right there that faithfulness isn't about avoiding hardship. Hardships often come. It's about persevering in your obedience through the hardship. So here they're an example of obedience and a holy calling before God. After Nadab and Abihu's death, Eleazar and Ithamar had a choice. Would they follow in their brother's footsteps of being disobedient to their priestly duties and being careless in what they were doing? I would think that would be a silly mistake on their part, but they had to make that choice. Or were they going to serve in the way that God asked them to serve and uphold his commands instead of doing it their way? Well, needless to say, they chose obedience. And God commanded Eleazar and Ithamar not to mourn publicly. We find this in Leviticus 10. We also find that the father, Aaron, never said a word either against God in this. The priesthood demanded putting God first in holiness. They continued serving in the tabernacle even despite their grief, shall we say. Eleazar eventually became the high priest after his father Aaron. We find this in Numbers chapter 20. And Ithamar was entrusted with managing the tabernacle and all its resources. We find this in Exodus 38. So they went on to have significant roles. This shows us that God honors those who remain faithful even in difficult situations. And these unsung heroes prove that. Let's look at Eleazar for just a moment, the priest who went on to lead with strength. He became a key leader in Israel. We find that he assisted Moses and Joshua through their ministries. He helped distribute the promised land. We find that in Joshua chapter 14. His descendants carried out the high priesthood for generations to come. So his faithfulness was blessed. Uh, he was quiet. He was steady. He was a leader that didn't seek fame, but sought to remain obedient and faithful to what God had said. Well, that's a lesson for us, right? True leadership is not about making a name for myself. It's about serving God's people and doing it well. Well, Ishtamar is also a good example for us. He was a steward of sacred things. Eleazar took the high priest role, but Ishtamar was equally important, overseeing the work of the tabernacle and making sure things were done as God had commanded. He saw what happened when his brothers didn't. He supervised the Levites and ensured the tabernacle was set up properly when they moved. He managed resources, showing faithfulness in administration. Though his name isn't often highlighted, his role is vital to the worship of Israel. Sometimes, we might think that frontline leaders are all that matters, but Ishtamar reminds us that God values the behind the scenes faithfulness just as much, and it's just as important. We have a lesson from that even hidden roles are essential to God's kingdom. How does their story, these unsung heroes, speak to us today, these two brother priests? Well, like Eleazar and Ithamar, we all face defining moments in our life. Will we choose faithfulness in the face of hardship? Will we serve God without seeking personal glory? Will we be stewards of what God entrusts to us, even what seems like sometimes the very small things? Well, you may never stand in the spotlight like Moses and Aaron or Joshua, but God sees your faithfulness. Maybe today you're like Eleazar. You're called to lead with strength and to stand forth. Or maybe you're like Ishtamar. You're called to faithfully manage what God has entrusted to you. Either way, God rewards those who serve him with reverence and, more importantly, obedience. Well, I hope this blesses you today. Please share this channel and subscribe to it. If you want to know more about what I'm doing these days, go to the website timsearcyministries.com. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.